What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Brian Kostiw, and we've got a great episode in store for you all today. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to be joined alongside by two great guests to give us all the latest on college basketball before the season starts on November 3rd. First up from the Vault Network and the host of the Big Man Off Campus radio show, we'll have Tom Harkness on the program. And then later on in the show, we have a special interview with St. Bonaventure assistant men's basketball coach Nick Schmidt. We're really looking forward to today's episode, but before we get into it, if you want to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube channels, we highly recommend doing so to stay up to date with all the latest from Down to the Wire. And then also checking out our social media. Our Instagram is at down.to-the-wire, and our X, formerly Twitter, is at down_to-the-wire. We hope that you guys tune into those social media platforms and also tune into our newest radio show, the Bryant Bulldog Sports Hour on 990 WBOB, airing Mondays from 8 to 9 p.m. You can also watch the previous recordings on those episodes on DTW platforms. Thank you guys for the little intro. Let's jump right into the episode. All right, we're joined alongside by Vault Network contributor and the host of the Big Man Off Campus radio show, Tom Harkness. Tom, glad to have you on the show today. How you doing?
Brian, I'm doing great. How about yourself? It's great to be here.
Absolutely, Tom. Glad to be here. Glad to have you joining us today. And obviously, with college basketball right around the corner, we're glad to have someone with your breadth of knowledge joining us today. I know that you just got back from Big East Media Day at Madison Square Garden. Just take us through that experience and how that all went.
Yeah, it was a wild Tuesday. That's for sure. Hopped on a train at about 6 a.m. out of Providence and took the ride into New York City. Fortunately, you just get right off in Moynihan there and you cross the street, you're at MSG. But it was an early morning, but a great day overall. Got some great interviews. What I really like about it, Brian, is we've been to media days and whatnot. This was the first time I've been to the Big East Media Day, and it's almost like a pop-up shop. Like they just put all the teams out on the floor, and you can pretty much just jump from table to table, talking to players, talking to coaches. So it was really nice to kind of have that access, as opposed to I've been to a few where you're fighting over a microphone or something. You could just pull a guy aside and have a conversation with them and get some great quotes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to talk about some of those storylines in just a second. I know that we have some on the docket right here, but kind of going into the day, were there any storylines that really stuck out to you, while, on the scene there that you weren't really on your radar beforehand?
I think the biggest one for me was who was going to be Big East Player of the Year.
Sure.
We knew that it was going to be released prior to Media Day began at 9. It was announced that they were going to be releasing the preseason rankings, preseason honors, Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, so on and so forth at 8. So, I mean, it kind of, you had an hour to digest the news, and it ended up being Zuby Ejiofor of St. John's, which personally, I think it was the right decision. I think that there was also about 5 or 6 guys that you could have given that honor to, which is why when the Big East preseason first team rankings came out, we saw 7 players listed on that. It's just a testament to how competitive the conference will be this year. I do think Zuby was the right pick. I think that's the safest pick, and I don't mean that in a bad way when I say it. Um, it was the right choice to have him. He put up 14 and 8 for St. John's last year. He's a real interior force inside. So that was something that you go into media day and it automatically becomes a talking point when you have headlines like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, myself doing, my other show, the Bryant Bulldog Sports Hour, we became very apparent with, what St. John's had to offer last year. I know we went into their building and had the chance to play them. And, we had a pretty competitive first half with them before Raph Pinzone went down with that lower body injury. And it was a really interesting game. And, they're a great team and, all the best to them. And they've had a really great offseason, like as you were saying in, the pregame or the pre-show, talks that, Coach Pitino's brought in, his best roster yet. Like he's been, it was an incredible offseason of recruiting for him. And, he's been able to really transform that program since his arrival there just a couple seasons ago. Just talk about, what this, run is really kind of looking like for St. John's and how that offseason really came together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you have Rick Pitino, in the building, the money's gonna flow, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, one of the greatest minds that we've seen, especially at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
And even, in his 70s, he is showing no signs of stopping. Now, I know he did kind of stir the pot yesterday when he said my time is coming to a close, but let's be honest, father time catches up with all of us. I don't think
Yeah.
that he was saying that I'm retiring at the end of the year or anything. When he really meant was, I know I'm getting a little long in the tooth. Um, and as part of that too, you're going to have programs like St. John's. They're going to want to invest immediately, especially after you look at the year they had last year. They finish as a 2 seed. Well, they first off they outright win the Big East regular season and postseason titles. They go into the NCAA tournament as a 2 seed. They're playing in Providence, which, as we know, there is a history there between Rick Pitino and the city of Providence from his time with the Providence College Friars. And then they bow out early in the round of 32 to Arkansas. So you go into this offseason, and just with all the NIL investments they had, Rick put together his best group. You have Dylan Darling coming over from Idaho State, and he's a guy that can really play about the truest point guard position you could ask for. You have former 5-star recruits like Joe Sansanin coming over from Arizona State and Ian Jackson from UNC. They're again young guards, a lot of athleticism, and as the recruiting trail indicates, there's a lot of hype around guys like that. And then you go out and Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, guys like that. They're going to solidify your front court. Bryce Hopkins, when healthy, Brian, you and I have seen him firsthand. This guy could be an all Big East player, let alone an All American. He is that kind of talent. So I think that St. John's they were picked fifth in the AP Top 25 preseason poll. That's their high watermark as a program. And I think that it's deserved. I mean, this team is very dangerous this year.
Yeah, I mean, credit to Coach Pitino. He's brought St. John's back to a place that they really haven't been historically since like the 1980s. It's been, really something to see. It's kind of bringing us back to the Lou Carnesecca days, and
Right.
it's really, something special to watch there. When you talked about the history of, Coach Pitino and Providence, that there's almost seemingly been another chapter written in that this offseason with Bryce Hopkins going to St. John's. And it's been, that's been quite the story. Obviously, he had the ACL tear in January of 2024 and then was limited to 3 games last year. And there was kind of some conversations about that medical red shirt with him holding out. And I know there was some drama on that end. And, he ends up going to a, conference rival. Just talk about how that's all transpired and just what your take of it's been.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Bryce was not there yesterday, and I wasn't too surprised that that was the
Yeah.
case because I think we all know what the questions were going to be.
Yeah.
You have Providence College and Bryce Hopkins in the same arena. They're trying to Providence and St. John's are going to be facing off on January 3rd at MSG, and I think that the Big East is trying to kick those questions down the line until then.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. This is media day. There's, as I mentioned, a whole bunch of other storylines that we want to get to. Bryce's teammate Zuby Ejiofor was named the preseason player of the year. You don't want him up there and just fielding question after question about this. But I think it's a good thing that we need to discuss because you're right. There was a lot of skepticism about the way in which Bryce Hopkins left Providence. A lot of people felt as though he was healthy enough to play last year. I'm not saying that's coming from the Providence College staff. I think that's more of a fan perspective. Being in those pressers with Kim English post game, Kim was very adamant that he wanted Bryce to do what was best for him, not only last season, but for his career moving forward. Kim and his staffers and the 2024-25 Friars understood that there was a chance that Bryce Hopkins was not going to come back. Pretty much, I mean, he went down in December, and by early to mid January, there was an understanding that he probably wasn't going to come back and play this year, and he might have played his last game in a Providence College uniform, and that ended up being the case. And I don't think that anyone within the Providence College athletics department or that team wishes him any sort of ill will. But I do think, Brian, you make a good point. That Providence fan base is relentless. We see it on Twitter all the time.
Yeah.
And you love the passion that they have, but there's also where there's smoke, there's fire, and they kind of smelt some smoke and it spread like wildfire. All these theories about what happened, what transpired with Bryce Hopkins transferring to St. John's. To be honest, I think a lot of it's been overblown. I think it's just a matter of Bryce thought it was a move that he wanted to make. St. John's was aggressive. Again, I talked about the NIL they have, the opportunity to play for Rick Pitino, the opportunity to play at Madison Square Garden. I think that those were all things that really enticed Bryce, and he made that decision. I don't think there was any sort of tampering or anything to the extent to which some fans suggest. I think it was just, an athlete making a decision that was the best decision for him at the time. And I think that Kim English and the Providence program understand that, they accept that, and they're looking forward for this new era themselves.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that all transpires. I think in terms of, with Bryce, it kind of happened early enough in the season, and he basically had to make a business decision for himself there,
Right.
whether he was healthy or not. That's kind of what it came down to. Where if this happened, after maybe that 30% of the season threshold, and his eligibility is, already out the window, that was already going to be his last season. Maybe there is a chance that he comes back that year. But I think, like you said, where they kind of knew by mid-January that was going to be it. That's, all that is at that point. He only played 3 games, so he's able to get the extra year back. And, he's trying to, improve his ranks on the pro side. And he was able to find that with St. John's. And I mean, that's just another credit to Coach Pitino on finding trust in him and giving him that. But, you mentioned Providence, and, things for, Coach English and that team have kind of been, there's been turbulence there the past couple of years is maybe the right word to use there. The first year you saw that there was, some semblance of, a direction, following the departure of Ed Cooley. And then last season, the bottom kind of fell out. And now we're kind of looking at it this year where, they finished 9th in the Big East last year. Now they're predicted to be 4th in this preseason poll. Just talk about the offseason that they were able to have and just how that all came together with them.
Yeah, Brian, and I'm glad you mentioned the ranking because, to be honest with you, I was shocked that they were picked fourth. But Kim English had a certain sort of edge, a certain determination in proving that they are, worthy of that fourth place ranking that they received in the preseason coaches poll. And that was evident throughout his media availability yesterday. It wasn't a matter of he wasn't asking people, do you think we're not good enough? He was saying, no, we are good enough to be the fourth team in this conference. We're good enough to be the best team in the conference, if you ask me. And honestly, based on what he's done this offseason, I think that he's deserved it in saying that. Like you said, Brian, last year was historically bad for Providence. Record-wise, they were 12-20. It was their first 20-loss season in 40 years. It was 1985 the last time they finished with a season. They finished a season in which they lost 20 or more games. And even going back to Kim's first year, they were 21-14. To your point, you saw some promise. They were almost an NCAA tournament team. They take that big step back this year, and you're kind of, or last year, I should say, and you're kind of like, all right, well, this is kind of a make or break year for Kim English, and he really hit a home run in the portal, in my opinion. You're looking at guys like Jason Edwards, who was picked as a All Big East second team member in the preseason poll. Oswin Arunser, who was a third team honoree. Those guys are just tremendous talents. Edwards is a fantastic point guard, veteran guy coming over from a Vanderbilt team that made the NCAA tournament. Arunser is a guy that I think could be the Big East defensive player in the year within a year or two. I think that he's going to be in that conversation this season, and he's just a sophomore. You think it's the returners that they bring in, or the returners that they have coming back. Corey Floyd is now in his 4th year there. He's the captain of this team. You ask any player, I mean, that's their leader. Ryan Mila is coming back. Another guy, he and Oswin were both all Big East freshman team honorees last season. Rich Barron is a guy that can shoot the ball. And then just looking at, the freshmen that they're bringing in, and Jalen Harrell, a 4-star recruit from Boston, Jameer Jones, a 5-star recruit from Florida. Those are great talents. You got Stefan Vox, who's an international product who teams are really raving about. And then continuing with the transfers, Jalen Sellers from UCF. He averaged 15.3 points per game a couple of years ago. He only played in 3 games last year for the UCF Knights. And he is dealing with a hip pointer right now. So hopefully he gets healthy and we can see him on the floor. Duncan Powell comes over from Georgia Tech. He's a real floor spacer, a stretch forward that is one of the best corner shooters in all of college basketball. You put him in the corner, he can knock down those threes. So on and so forth. Daquan Davis, a guy coming over from Florida State who initially committed to Providence, backed out of that commitment, goes to Florida State, and then ends up back at Providence because of the relationship he has with Kim English. Cole Hargrove, a guy from Drexel, a real all defensive caliber player, a guy that, is going to fight tooth and nail for the team. I really like what Providence has done. I really like the roster they've assembled. And I do think they're deserving of being put in the top half of the Big East. They are worthy of being in that conversation. The three teams above them, St. John's, Connecticut, and Creighton in that order, I do think those are the three best teams in the conference. After that, those waters do get murky. And I think that Providence can be one of those teams that can absolutely emerge atop the scrum that will be the Big East this year.
Yeah, now obviously, like Providence, if they get to that top 4 seed and they're able to, compete and potentially even get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament, I think that would obviously bode well for them based on how these past 2 years have gone. Just with this being, like, as you called it, like the make or break year for Kim English, I'm not one to really do hot seat talk. That's not really kind of my how I kind of operate. But when you look at this year, with it being what you would describe as a make or break year, what maybe is that benchmark that this Providence team needs to meet this year for, for the Providence athletic department, for Coach English, for that entire staff to, see that marketable improvement?
Well, let me say this. I'm with you in the sense that I usually don't like to use the term make or break. I think that Kim English is a fantastic coach.
Yeah,
I think that he has the full support of, Steve Napolillo and the Providence administration,
yeah,
as he should. I think that they really do believe in him. They made the investment in him after Ed Cooley left for Georgetown, and that was well documented, that departure and all the drama that came with it.
sure.
And they reinvested after his first year. They gave him a 1 year extension. They believe in Kim English and they believe that last year was an outlier year. And I do as well. I mean, that team just was not healthy. That team did not have any chance to mesh on the floor. Guys were constantly injured, and the biggest being Bryce Hopkins. As we spoke about a few minutes ago, for a while, guys didn't know if Bryce would be back. And then, eventually you get to the point where you're like, he's not coming back. And still, the health was not there for the last year's group. And especially when you're losing a guy like Bryce Hopkins, who was voted a preseason All Big East first team member for St. John's this year, it just speaks to his talent, right? Even as he's working his way back from a couple injury riddled seasons. Um, you're not going to put your most competitive team out there. So Providence didn't have a chance to put their most competitive team out there, and the record was what it was. They
Yeah,
go into this year. I think that Kim English, I don't think that, his seat is too hot. I do think that, again, this is a Providence College fan base that really, really cares. This is a basketball school, right? There is no football, there is no
yeah,
base. Hockey's great, right? They have a nice hockey team, but it is basketball is the cash cow for Providence. Those fans are Iracuous. They love the Friars and they love competitive basketball teams. And there was a lot of frustration from the fan base last year because of how the season went. Um, I think there is a huge difference between what the fan base wants and what the administration believes, because I'm always going to side with the administration. And I am
sure.
going to trust that Kim English is in a good place. But I do think that the administration wants to see market improvement from the program this upcoming season, and I believe they will. So if I had to guess, I would say that Kim English is in the absolute perfect space at Providence College if they make the NCAA tournament this year. I think that that needs to be and really is, in his mind as well, the line in the sand, not in terms of if he loses his job or not, but there's no greater job security than success. And for Providence College, success is making the NCAA tournament. I think that this team could win, could maybe even make it out of the first weekend. I think they could certainly win an NCAA tournament game, depending on seeding and opponent and all those other factors. But roster talent wise on that roster, I absolutely think that they are a second weekend team. And I think that Kim English is a good coach that can get them there.
Yeah, and I think that, Coach English definitely has the ability to, take this kind of talent far. It's just going to be a matter of, how it all shapes up. And like you said last year, health was a big factor in that. And that really
Right.
did hurt them last year. So, I mean, yeah, just that's going to be something to really look forward to. I know those, Providence fans. They're extremely passionate. We saw them obviously when Providence is at the height of their powers. They're out there and they're loud in support. And then we even saw it in the couple of years since Ed Cooley's been back to the dunk, or
Yeah.
now the amp, and had the chance to see that they can be vicious as well, and they can they're very passionate about their team. They want them to be successful, and they'll fight you tooth and nail to get that. Just obviously Providence is going to be one of those teams that we look ahead to with this year. But Tom, I want to do some talk on your alma mater with the with the Rhode Island Rams. The A10 poll came out for them. They're predicted to finish 12th right now, and obviously the story with Rhode Island this decade has been a very different one than maybe the one we grew up being accustomed to, where, yeah, sure, there were some down seasons in there where maybe, yeah, like, they bottomed out and things weren't that great. But I think when we were growing up, Rhode Island was really just known as a really solid team that was always, competing for that tournament spot. I remember fondly being in, I think, a junior in high school, watching, them take down Oklahoma and Trae Young in the first round, and that was an awesome time being, a college basketball fan early on in my, watching days with that, and yeah, just things have not been well for them ever since the turn of the decade. Just from your perspective of it, just give me like what's kind of just been the overall temperature down in Kingston these past couple years.
Yeah, Brian, I'm actually gonna let you know. I think one of the biggest reasons I went to URI was because of college basketball and Dan Hurley.
Absolutely.
I was a 2018 graduate of Pontiac High School, and I remember being in the library watching that URI Oklahoma game, and just, oh man, I mean, it was a real nail biter. Went to overtime, and I was terrified, and that was it solidified it for me. I was like, I want to be a part of this culture that Dan
Yeah.
Hurley's building. Knowing that I wanted to get into this field of work. Unfortunately, I never got the chance. Dan took the job at UConn after that 2017, 2018 season. So, I am still fortunate of the opportunities I had at URI with Coach David Cox and Thor Bjorn and the administration up there. Um, Really, I think the best way that I can put the past few years, Rhode Island fans, just like Providence fans, and just like most college basketball fans, are passionate. And there's a lot of frustration from the fan base with just the way things have kind of tailspun since the Dan Hurley days. Now, Rhode Island has always put together a relatively competitive basketball team. I think at their highs, they have been a very good program. At their lows, they have been subpar. Um, right now, there are lows that I don't think the fans are accustomed to. There have been some bad years here and there, but let's be honest, it's been a string of about 4 or 5 bad seasons right now, and not all of that is on Archie Miller, who's been the head coach. He's going into his 4th year there. But the fact of the matter is that you do kind of have to look at the state of college basketball right now and the coach you have. Archie Miller's best years were at Dayton, right? And one of the things that he did well at Dayton was retain talent. Guys were coming back for a second, third, sometimes even 4th year playing under him. And those Flyers teams had tremendous success because of the camaraderie that was being built. Unfortunately, college basketball is not an environment conducive to that kind of camaraderie anymore. I don't want to say conducive because I do think it's possible, but I mean, let's be honest. It's a very different state of the league that we're experiencing right now. A lot of one and dones, not just in terms of going to the draft or something, but in terms of, where does the next NIL paycheck come from? That's something that we're seeing a lot. The transfer portal has has just boomed at an exponential rate, and it continues to year in year, you know. And I think that that's something that Archie Miller is trying to adjust to the best of his ability. He has not been able to field a roster with any sort of returning players in any of his 4 years at Rhode Island. You know, he comes in and a lot of guys transferred out after David Cox left. So he's starting from scratch in year one. And I feel like we see that a lot with college coaches. So we give them the benefit of the doubt, see what works, what doesn't, and then go into year two. Um, Tried some things out going into year two. They don't work. All right, well, now let's try it for year three. Year three is really the year where something needs to click. And they had such a great start to the year. Um, they were fantastic to start the year 12-1. And then all of a sudden, conference play begins and the wheels fall off. And you're just looking at this team and you're like, is it ever really going to work here? Especially after they bowed out to Fordham in the opening round of the A10 tournament last March. Now it's year four. Again, it's an entirely new roster. You know, you're looking at the guys that they have coming in via the transfer portal, the freshmen they're bringing in. The only real returning piece for this URI group last year was Drisa Traore, who was a reserve forward for the group. And I don't know how this roster is going to mesh on the floor. We will see. I think they have very talented pieces. I think Tyler Cochran, Miles Corey, those are guys that can be very good, maybe even all A10 caliber players by the end of the year. But when you really just kind of slice it and you call a spade right now, it's just kind of become synonymous with the program. You go, you look at this roster and you say, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't, which is an unfortunate reality, but it's become a reality that's all too common for the Rhode Island Rams these past few seasons.
Yeah, and that's just been, the case down there. That third year for college coaches, especially in, the higher levels is really that testing point. And, each of the past couple seasons we've seen that win total slightly start to tick up. They finally ended up having a winning season under him at 18-13, but like you said, conference play was not, as favorable as they'd wished it could have been. And, they're still fighting for, to have that, improvement as it goes forward. Just, for them this year, obviously that preseason ranking doesn't bode well for them, but at the end of the day, those are just predictions. In that locker room and maybe in that administration, what do you think is maybe that benchmark goal they want to see this year, going forward?
Well, I think that even though fans are frustrated, URI is still one of the top institutions in the A10 in terms of
Sure.
revenue. They are a very attractive destination if you're looking for an A10 school. The A10 has had a down year for a number of years now. It really has become a one bid league. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't anticipate that changing this year. I guess we'll see. But the fact of the matter is that Rhode Island has to finish, in my opinion, somewhere between the top three or top five in the conference for you to have any sort of real confidence in Archie Miller moving forward. The non-conference slate last year was great, but it was the non-conference slate. When it came down to it in the A10, those are really the games you need to win. Those were the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes for these coaches, right? You want to have a very impressive resume when it comes to what you do in conference play. Now, Brian, I mean, let's just talk about Bryant for a second, right? I mean,
Yeah.
look at what Phil Martelli Jr. did last year. I guarantee you that that was what really boosted his resume. His performance against America East schools, not even last year, but even, during the 2023-24 season, the Bryant Bulldogs were very competitive in the America East Conference. They emerged in that league. And I think that's what you're looking for Rhode Island to do. Will they have the success that last year's Prime team did? I don't think so. I think, the Atlantic 10 again is one of those leagues where it really is a toss up almost every night. I mean, you go in there and you think you have a cakewalk, and I don't want to call any teams out by name and say, oh, URI versus so and so will be an easy win for them. But
Sure.
you know,
But
there are certain
I understand where
games.
you're coming from, though.
Yeah, there are just certain games that you look at and you say, that's a winnable game, and then they lose it. My point being, though, I do think that they need to be at least in the top five of the 14 team A10 for you to say, okay, Archie took a step forward and it just took a little longer than anticipated. If they're in the bottom half again, you know, I suspect based on his salary and everything, the program will look to move in another direction. Um, but time will tell.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's going to really all depend on, how that all transpires this season. And like you said, when you were talking about, Coach Martelli and, the success he had at Bryant, and now he's in the A10 himself as the coach of the VCU Rams. They're predicted to finish first in the conference. And I think a large part of, obviously Coach Martelli did a fantastic job at Bryant getting them to March Madness. And I think something else that boosted the stock of him was that when you looked at, the college basketball and the March Madness landscape, and typically you have those guys that you'll have teams where, you'll have that Cinderella upset in the tournament, and, then that coach will get a big time job somewhere else. Like you can maybe think of like Tobin Anderson with Iona. You could think of Shaheen Holloway with getting the Seton Hall job after taking St. Peter's on that fantastic run. And, they get those big time jobs. There really wasn't any of those really true upsets. There wasn't a 16 or a 15 seed that was taking down a 1 or a 2 this year. And really Bryant ended up being that kind of lower seed, underdog team that probably got the most coverage and most press just based on what they were able to do. They were only down 5 points to Michigan State at halftime, and they did that in the face of Earl Timberlake missing a significant amount of time in that first half after taking that blow to the head and then going viral on the internet with, with blood streaming down his face and all that. And they competed really early in that game. And I think just in the end, Michigan State just had more depth, and that's kind of all it was. I mean, first half, it was very close early on. I think it was just attrition that kind of set in at the end. And I think, showcasing that was really, I think, what, helped open the door for, Coach Martelli at VCU. As someone who, had the chance to work under Mitt Bryant, I wish him the best of luck there. When you look at him and what this team's going to look like and his team's going to look like next year, you have some of the guys like Jadrian Tracy, Brandon Jennings going in. You have some of the transfers that he brought down, like Barry Evans and Keyshawn Mitchell from Bryant. And then, the staff additions that he has down there as well. Just, give me your thoughts on the VCU Rams and, how you predict that they'll do this season.
Yeah, it's funny because Phil was a topic of conversation yesterday at the Big East Media Day.
Sure.
In a good way, of course. Like you said, a wonderful person to speak with to cover his games, and we wish him the best at VCU. And
Yeah.
honestly, from a talent perspective, that team is tremendous. You mentioned Jadrian Tracy, Brandon Jennings. I saw him play at VCU. Christian Furman as well. Those are guys that I love what they did. They have been there for some time now, and they're riding the wave of Phil Martelli and all he's bringing in, and he's bringing in some real talent.
Yeah.
Barry Evans, America East Newcomer of the Year last year, who returns to the A10 after spending a couple seasons as a Bonaventure. You and I know how good Barry is, and
Yeah.
Keyshawn Mitchell. Tremendous strides as a sophomore last season. I think that he could be a real. I think that there are some A10 fans who are going to learn something about Keyshawn Mitchell this year.
Yeah.
Uh, and then just the youngsters, I really like what they've done in terms of bringing in guys like Ahmad Noel from UConn, former four-star recruit who has all the talent in the world. Nick Lewis, another former four-star who was initially committed to Xavier and then makes his way over to VCU. I mean, Phil Martelli, I saw the box score from when VCU played Villanova in their scrimmage just past Sunday, and Villanova won 70-51. But I love that Phil Martelli put 12 guys on that floor. That's the beauty of a scrimmage. You can see what you have in these guys, and you have some really talented guys joining that roster this year. I think that VCU rightfully deserved to be the preseason number one. I think that Phil Martelli Jr. deserved the opportunity to we're gonna miss him. Don't get me wrong. Gonna miss seeing him at Bryant games. But it's great that he gets an opportunity at a school like VCU, which again, like Providence and like so many other schools, is a basketball school. And I mean, look at how guys have just flocked there. I think he's going to have a really successful year. Um, and honestly, I think that he just is a little more equipped to the modern game than some of these other coaches. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but I do mean it in a sense where I feel like his impact is going to be a little more instantaneous. You know, I just think that he's the youth that he brings, the ability to recruit that he has, that's really going to fit well with that VCU program. I think they're going to be at the top of the A10 this year.
Yeah, I think that they definitely are poised to do very well this season. I think that, again, getting a chance to cover him during his time at Bryant, and I'm actually glad that you mentioned the fact that he played 12 guys in that Villanova scrimmage where, I had a chance to listen to his pregame interview on the VCU radio ahead of that game, and he ended up saying that, obviously they're going to go out and try to compete and try to win that game. But he said, I think in the first half, that he wanted to try some different rotations, try out some different players. And then the second half, I think he said once they got inside that 8 minutes, they were going to kind of see where they were at and then, play it out accordingly. I think if it was closer, maybe they push a little bit harder. I don't know exactly maybe what his mindset was with all of that. I just heard the pregame radio and got a chance to listen to that. When you look at, some of those guys that came over from Bryant, Barry Evans, who was the newcomer of the year, he had some early struggles in his career at St. Bonaventure, was really trying to find a role for himself. And I had a chance to talk with VCU assistant men's basketball coach Ryan Daly a couple months ago. And he talked about Barry during the recruiting process. And he said that, after your sophomore year, and at least I think he even said like during the middle of your sophomore year, most coaches kind of know what you're going to be because they've had, maybe 100 or so practices of you. They've seen you in 40 or so games. And they kind of know what your play style is going to be. And maybe that kind of affected Barry during his time with the Bonnies. And then he comes over to Bryant, shines. I had a chance when I was talking with Barry. He loves that staff of Coach Martelli. He is so appreciative for them. From what I had heard, he basically has kind of said that, he gave them, Coach Martelli gave him that love for the game back and really reignited that in him. And then, he's been someone that's, I really hope that he has a ton of success with the Rams. And then with Keyshawn Mitchell, there is so much promise with him because, when you look at the height and the intangibles that he has, it could be very special because he is, basically a 7-footer. And then he's really starting to get better with those 3-point shots. I saw on the VCU Instagram page that they were promoting that, he had a shot down there out there at Philly. And, there is a ton of promise with him. And I didn't know initially, maybe they were going to put him on a red shirt for the season and kind of have him bulk up a little bit because when he was, he had the size maybe for the America East kind of talent that he was going against, but I was kind of skeptical whether it was going to translate to the A10. But from some sources I've talked to there, he's done very well. He's put on the weight. He's put on some good muscle. And I think that he's going to be poised for a very good season with them this year. He was the one that I had some questions about, though, initially. I knew Barry Evans had competed in the A10. He knew what that style and what that pace looked like. Keyshawn was one that I initially had trepidations about, but from what I've heard, he's proven all the doubters wrong, and he looks like he's going to be, ready for a big season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I did see a picture of him, and he did look a little bigger.
Yeah.
Keyshawn did look a little bigger. He was a little wiry when he was in Smithfield.
Yeah.
It definitely has added some muscle, and I think the biggest thing is his addition of the outside shot. We
Yeah.
saw him shoot the three with confidence last year at Bryant, which was something that was, to me, it was very impressive how comfortable he was being outside the perimeter. I mean, I didn't see him hesitate on any of his 3-point attempts. He was shooting it. And, I think that that's something that is a testament to the Bryant staff. And I'm glad that you mentioned Ryan Daly because Phil's got a great support staff over there. Brandon Phelps, Chris Cole, and I know his brother Jimmy is down there as well now. So that's great. I mean, he just has a whole band of brothers that are supporting him and uplifting the team. And to your point about Barry Evans, I do remember Barry saying something similar after the America East Championship game. Just kind of really expressing his gratitude to Phil Martelli and the coaches for bringing his love of the game back. It didn't really work out with him at St. Bonaventure because I think that they were trying to figure out what is he? Is he a 3 that you put out there? Is he a small ball 4? And then he comes over to Bryant, and again, it's just, I think that the best way to put it is during the 23-24 season, we saw what Danny Rivera was for
Yeah.
Bryant. He transfers to UMass, and you bring in a guy in Barry Evans who Rivera was 6'6". Evans is 6'8", and I think that they kind of utilized Barry somewhat
Yeah.
similarly uh, as to how they utilized Daniel Rivera, and they found something with that. It did take a little bit of time, but once he hit the ground running, he was off, and deservedly won the America East Newcomer of the Year award. And I think I voted for him as the I know Earl had a tremendous America East tournament, but I was really impressed with Barry throughout the America East tournament as well last year. I think he was my nod for the America East tournament MVP, and I think he's going to do great things at VCU. He's with that staff again. He's back in the A10. Sometimes the guy just needs to change the scenery, and then they can jump back into a league like that, and they're not going to lose sight of who they are, or what their role is. I think that you know might have to figure it out a little bit with some new teammates, but Barry and Keyshawn staying with that staff, they're going to be confident within themselves, and that staff is going to be confident with them. And I think that they're going to have both of them will have tremendous seasons there.
Yeah, I'm excited for what those players are going to bring. And then I was glad as well that you mentioned that staff that he is down there of, Coach Phelps. And then I think Coach Cole being down there, he's, from the DMV area originally. And, having him back in that area where he's been able to, really thrive with helping this team recruit, getting guys like Earl Timberlake in there and bringing them in, like even Sharif Gross-Bullock from years prior, and getting them onto that Bryant roster and bringing in legit talent. And I think having him back in his own backyard again, that's going to be really exciting to see what he can do there in terms of recruiting, because they've been able to really bring in some top-notch talent the past couple of years, and Bryant was really a hotbed for DMV talent. That's really where you saw a lot of those guys go from that area, and it's really something to look at. And now as we kind of look ahead to maybe the new era of Bryant basketball, there's obviously some exciting things on the horizon with them, with Coach Jamion Christian. Him coming over from Italy and Palinsestro Trieste, and there's obviously going to be those lofty expectations and what that's going to be on the table with them this year. And the America East preseason poll came out; they were picked sixth in that, and I think some people were down about that originally. I actually made an analogy on the Bryant Bulldog Sports Hour show, and I said that, yeah, obviously that's something that's disappointing, but the Bryant baseball team in 2024 was predicted to finish fifth in the preseason poll and came out and won the conference. And
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of the day, you still have to go out and play the games. Like, it's a good thing that the games aren't played on paper, because, that it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You still have to go out there and compete. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team kind of comes together. I've had a chance to talk with Coach Christian a little bit. He's given me the lowdown on, the team on this roster, just some little notes that I have from his, different interviews that I've done with him. And then recently from the, America East Media Day on the Field of 68, channel. He's, really emphasized that it's going to be a very pass heavy, high volume threes. He said to me actually on my show that they're going to try to shoot, at least 51% of their shots from three and try to lead the league in assists. And then they're also going to try to get the opponent to turn it over around 20% of the time. And that's going to be their play style. And, from what I've heard from the players, from Aaron Davis, who's played in both systems where it was, a lot of isolation and the, previous regime. And now with this one, it's a lot more passing. And, it's really interesting to see how this style is going to work in the America East. Just from your perspective of it, give me your take on, Coach Christian, this system, and what that's really going to look like.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I did actually go back and see the Field of 68 interview he did, and honestly, I was quite intrigued with it for a number of reasons. Because I think that when Jamie and Christian got started, um, really when he started to become more of an intriguing coach in his early years at Mount St. Mary's, the team was kind of slow. Offensively, they labored at times, and seeing him at George Washington, I think you had some of the same concerns. So this feels like a very different style of offense that he's advertising, and honestly, I'm all for it. It's very analytically based. I'm an analytics guy, so I think that the whole concept of making most of your shots a three-point shot and trying to move the ball around as much as you can, that falls in line with this sort of sabermetrics revolution we're seeing in basketball, and is started to touch down at the collegiate level. And I think that it's something that his year overseas has kind of instilled in him. I'm sure that this was a thought in his mind when he was in Italy. If I get a chance to come back to college basketball, you know, my offensive philosophies are going to be very different. And like you said, we didn't really see it as much with this past regime, and that's not a knock on anyone when I say that. But it was a little more isolation heavy because you had guys like Rafael Pinzon, a three-level scorer, Earl Timberlake, who I mean is built like a linebacker. That when you needed a bucket, you could go to those guys, and 9 times out of 10, they were going to deliver for you. This year, this is a very different team, and I think you and I are both kind of wondering who that guy will be. We have our thoughts on certain players. Um, it's going to be really, really intriguing for me. As you mentioned, Aaron Davis is a name where he's going to be a junior now. It's going to I want to see what he can do. I think he's going to have an expanded role in this offense. I remember when he was coming out of high school, and guys like Phil Martelli Jr. were talking about what an offensive weapon he was, how he could shoot the ball. I really want to see. He's going to have an opportunity to shoot the ball this year. I would love to see how that looks, and just a great guy. I think that he will put it together as an upperclassman. Ja'Kai Robinson too. Is he going to come in and be your starting guard? Is he going to play the two? I don't know.
From
But
what
the
I've
same
from what
thing
I've
there.
heard from Jamion, he said that Jakai is going to go to the point guard spot.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think
I
that
just wanted to add that in, but yeah.
yeah, that's perfect. So I think that's great insight because if you're talking about trying to get the assist numbers up, I think that Sakai is a guy that is a very willing passer. And at 6'5", he's got the size and can see the floor very well. So it's certainly. I think that there's a lot of intrigue with this team. Again, we've talked about roster turnover at places like Providence and URI throughout the show, Brian. This is another place where there's going to be roster turnover. And the idea that Coach Christian has put out there, I think it could work, with the pieces that they have. It's just a matter of seeing it on the floor, as you said. I don't really pay too much mind to these preseason rankings because we'll find out how good the team is when the ball is tipped. But I do understand at the same time the frustration, especially after the year Bryant had last year.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be interesting as well. I mean, there are some guys that they're bringing in. They're going to have, one of the tallest lineups in the country next year. Well, this year, even with it just approaching. Quincy Allen, I had a chance to talk to him. He was an All-America East preseason selection coming over from Chicago State. I had a chance to talk with him. I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table, just not in terms of, obviously he has great length, but, his ability to shoot the ball as well. It seems that they're really going to utilize him in that role. And, he's extremely athletic. I think that he's going to be a big piece for them when you look at Daniel Akue, who, was played over in the Afro Basket League. And, I've gotten to see some tape on him, and, he is a freak with the ball. Like he is able to, like he is just so fluid, and for his size, he moves incredibly well. I think that it will translate well to the America East. I think that his size and his speed and what he brings is going to be really exciting to watch. And then, like you said, I think that you look at Ty Tabalos, who's coming over from New Hampton, and he reclassed to join this Bryant team this year, where initially he was going to maybe come out next year. And Coach Christian's really intrigued with what he's bringing to the table. I think he's already said that he's going to be basically the point guard one this year for this team. And with that being the case, maybe Jakai's maybe in that swing rotation role that he was kind of in last year, where if you need a guy, he comes up to the lineup and they move it around like that. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting thing. And I think, like you said, like last year's philosophy, play style wasn't really a knock on them because they were one of the best one-on-one isolation teams in the country with how they were able to operate. And I think this year, when you look at maybe the history of the America East and you look at Vermont being as dominant as they've been, they've gotten that way by having their own unique system and, not isolation heavy. They've had like their own system of, really on their end, it's been more of a slower pace of play. They're grinding you out on defense, almost basically a full court press. Essentially, every single play of the game is essentially how they play, and you'll have those 50 point, 60 point kind of ending scores essentially.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see Bryant kind of introduce their own philosophy because in previous years, like you said, where it's like, oh, Daniel Rivera comes out and they're getting Barry Evans to try to, beat Daniel Rivera in the one-on-one game and try to, recreate him like that. Now there it's almost kind of similar to a Vermont in a sense where it's like you have a actual system in place instead of just having guys go up, play one-on-one and try to make a play. Like now it's actually that they have like an actual like legit system in place. And I think that for the America East, where you've seen Vermont be successful with that, I think that could bode extremely well for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't say it better. I mean, the Vermont style is death by paper cuts,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they just want you to bleed out slowly.
It,
Sometimes, well, most of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. We saw that in the America East tournament this year when they lost to Maine. I'm sorry, Brandon.
Oh
Did
no,
you have something else?
I was gonna say like you said, it's death by a thousand paper cuts, and they make one turnover feel like six, and it's like
Right.
you make one mistake with them because before Bryant beat them this year, and like obviously Bryant had them in their building this year, they blew them out, and it was awesome to see them take them down like that, and then they then go up to Vermont, they drop it up there, and obviously Ja'Kai Robinson was out for that game, and they were missing some key pieces there, but it was still a tough loss nonetheless. Only, one of their two in league play. And then when you look at that, it's just interesting to see that, Vermont, like they still are able to always play their style. And, yeah, despite the losses, it's, really, yeah, like what I was going to say is basically in some of those earlier years before Bryant went on and won the conference this year, you had some competitive games with them. I think in our first year, we only lost to them by 4 at the Chase Athletic Center with a packed out building, and they just pull ahead at the end. And that's what they can do to you is that, you make one mistake and and it's going to cost you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of become their defining characteristic.
Yeah.
They just capitalize on your mistakes and make them feel infinitely worse than what
Yeah.
they would be if you could just get everyone to settle down. Guys start panicking when you make a mistake against Vermont, and that's just it's the Vermont style. It's their way of getting in your head, and I think that, as you mentioned, it's great that Coach Christian is coming in and he's trying to implement a certain style for this Bryant team. This is a unit that is going to have to move on from Earl Timberlake, from Rafael Pinzone, Barry. They're going to have to move on from the Phil Martelli Jr. ways, right?
Yeah.
You can think about what you accomplished last year, but you have to pay attention to what's happening this year and moving forward. This is a new regime, this is a new roster, and how are you going to make it as successful as we've seen the Bryant Bulldogs be in recent time? The only way to do that is to get guys to buy into the culture that you're trying to build. And it seems like that's been Coach Christian's mission since day one. And that's great to see. And one of the biggest parts of the culture is the offensive and defensive philosophies. So if you go out there and you tell your guys, hey, most of our shots are going to be threes and we're going to move the ball as much as we can, you're going to have a roster full of guys willing and able to do that. And I don't see anything on this roster that indicates to me otherwise. As you mentioned, Ty Tabalis is a really, really intriguing piece for me, especially with the reclassification, because I think he's a guy that could come in, and we've seen some good young guards enter the league in recent years. One that comes to mind is Martin Somerville, who was at UMass Lowell last season. And I mean, just a spark plug for that unit. He's transferred now, so we won't see him anymore. And hopefully that's not the case with Ty. But I mean, that's the most comparable player I can give in terms of if you can get a young guard on the floor and they can make something happen for your unit, boom, there's your culture change right there. And then you're off and running almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I mean, you even saw it kind of earlier on in Bryant's tenure when they were finally starting to turn the corner at the Division One level. You saw it with Michael Green when he came in, was an NEC Rookie of the Year candidate. Back in 2019, 2020. Like those guys are always able to go out there and compete like that. And then, if you get a young guard in there who can really, affect the game, like they can sometimes just take off and, it's like lightning in a bottle. I do want to say before we go, like someone I think that up of the players that are returning this year, I'm really excited to see how Ja'Kai Robinson will do in this system because he has he has that facilitator mentality. He's he had a couple double doubles last year, especially in the rebounding category. So he is someone that I think could really thrive in this system because I think the Martelli system last year where it was more one-on-one, more isolation stuff. He was able to thrive and like he was a great in what his role was. But I'm actually really intrigued to see what he can do with this type of a system now.
Yeah, I am as well. I talked about it really quickly. He's 6'5".
Yeah.
He's a big guard, and you mentioned it, Brian. He's got some double doubles with the points and rebounds where he had last season. He's pretty much a do-it-all piece in my mind. I don't think that he's score first. I think he's team first. And I think that bodes really well if you're trying to get that facilitative element up. If he's going to start or if he's going to come off the bench, he seems to be willing to do either. Um, we saw him dive over a table in that America East semifinals game against Albany. I mean, I
Yep.
almost got a shoe upside the head, but that was the least of my concerns. I mean, he took a real spill into the crowd. Um, and that was it's the personification of Ja'Kai Robinson to me. He's back here now. It seems like he really loves being a Bryant Bulldog. And I think that everyone on this team is going to and should look to him as a leader because he is just a very selfless player and it's exhibited anytime he's on the floor.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time today. For anyone interested in hearing more from Tom, you can watch his radio show, Big Man Off Campus, on 990 WBOB Mondays from 7 to 8 p.m. Tom, thank you again so much for coming on. Where will we see you next?
Oh, that's a good question. By the time college basketball season comes around, I think the third I'm at Providence, and then I'll be at Bryant, I'll be at URI, and I'll be all over the place, man. This is the best time of year. It keeps me busy, gets me out of the house. That's the best part of it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Stay tuned in just a second. We're going to hop right over and talk with St. Bonaventure assistant men's basketball coach Nick Schmidt, and we'll hop over to there right now. All right, we're joined alongside now by St. Bonaventure assistant men's basketball coach Nick Schmidt. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brian. How's everything with you?
Doing well, Nick. So obviously it's been, a crazy whirlwind of the past couple of months for you, with, two different coaching stops in your journey now and ending up back home. Just talk about what it's been like these past couple of months for you.
Yeah, it was, everything kind of caught me off guard. We ended up winning the league at Bryant, playing Michigan State in the tournament, and Coach Martelli ended up taking the job at VCU. And I was lucky enough to be a part of the staff that he took down there. Was down there for about 2.5, 3 months. And then a spot opened up, an assistant spot opened up at St. Bonaventure that, it was hard for me to pass up. But I had enough time to get an apartment down in Richmond, and then I moved back home to Olean. So I'm very lucky to be back home though. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Being back home now, obviously, getting to coach alongside your dad, who you were a grad assistant with him, early on in your coaching career. You've had the opportunity now to come full circle. Just talk about what that's like, for yourself, still very early on in your coaching career.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to be a college coach, and I was lucky to be able to be a grad assistant with my father for 2 years, from 18 to 20. And I kind of wanted to build some respect and do my own thing, create my own path. So for the last 5 years, I've, bounced around some different places and trying to gain some respect within the business. I didn't want to just be, my father's son. I wanted to kind of build my own name and my own network. And I feel like I was able to do that. But I I feel like the move back home now, it's worked out. I'm happy to be back, and I've always had St. Bonaventure, deep in my heart, somewhere that I feel like I call home, and I have some family and friends that still live around here, so I'm happy to be back, happy to be a part of the Bonaventure family again.
Absolutely. It's really interesting looking at how the Bonaventure, family and how that all kind of goes. And then Bryant have kind of become interwoven throughout the years. It kind of started a couple years ago when you saw Charles Pride go out to Bonaventure to start, for his 5th year after a very successful career at Bryant. And then, the following season, Barry Evans, with the help of, obviously you guys, and then Charles as well helped put that on the map for Bryant, and got Barry Evans to have a great year here at Bryant last year. And then, obviously the fact that you coached him during your time at Putnam Science Academy, it's really just interesting to see how it all kind of weaves together. Just talk about just that kind of net of college basketball and how it all comes together like that.
Yeah, the coaching tree and college basketball alone, it's very tight knit. A lot of people know each other, and those type of things happen more often than you would think. But Charles Pride and Barry Evans, those are two winners that were part of a couple different good programs, and have had really good careers. Charles obviously is graduated and on playing pro and is starting his career overseas. But Barry now at VCU, I was around him a lot, at Putnam Science and then playing for my dad. He's gotten better and better every single year as a basketball player and has grown as a kid and as a young man. So I've been very blessed to be around Barry Evans, and just knowing what type of person Charles Pride is. It's special to be, intertwined with those two guys for sure.
Absolutely. You were talking about, getting the chance to win the league at Bryant, the coaching changes with, Coach Martelli going to VCU, you going back home to coach alongside your dad and have all this kind of thing going on. Just take us through what that initial, night was like. I know a bunch of us up in Smithfield, we were seeing some of those tweets going out from Rothstein at like 10:30, and that next day in the office or just on campus was absolute mayhem. Just take us through what your experience was like with all of that.
Yeah, so I really didn't know what was going on and what to expect. I found out from an ESPN notification on my phone that Coach Martelli was taking the job at VCU, and he hadn't even accepted it to my knowledge. I think it was kind of just the information got leaked, and I don't think Coach Martelli had a chance to tell anybody. So I didn't know what to believe, but I reached out to some people that I feel like would have had some information before me, maybe. And we found out that it was actually happening. So I was still working at Bryant. Obviously, I was going into the office and didn't know what to expect. But as a college basketball coach, it's you don't know what's going to happen the next day. You got to be, you just got to live in the moment and make sure you're doing your job the right way. And whatever happens next, you just got to be prepared for. But it's about doing your job right now and figuring it out from there. But
yeah,
it was a lot. It was a lot because you didn't know what was going to happen. But it worked out very well for everybody, I think.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and listen, your guys' time at Bryant, although you were only there for the season you were there, it was a historic one nonetheless. It was the greatest team Bryant's ever rolled out on a court in their program's history. You guys had the chance to win the America East last year, went to March Madness, had that amazing experience. I was lucky enough to be able to be along for some of those games with you guys. I remember last year when I had a chance to talk with Coach Phelps at one point. I think it was around that UMBC NJIT trip where you guys started off league play undefeated. And, we were at the team hotel and he said to me, like, Brian, I think, with what we've seen, we really got a shot this year. And this is going to really be a special season, I think. When did that really start to creep into your mind that you guys had the potential to really do special things that year?
Yeah, I think it happened in the preseason in the summer when you saw the older, mature guys that were doing extra sprints up the football stadium stairs, and guys were getting extra shots in every day after practice, and the work ethic and you could see how much the guys wanted to win. And I think the talent was obviously there, but it was everything else that added up and made that team really great. There was a bunch of really good basketball players, a bunch of really good kids that had each other's backs, and they were willing to do anything to win for the team. They were very unselfish, and a bunch of different guys that could guard multiple positions that didn't have to score the ball to be really good. I just thought that all those things, turned that team into what we ended up. And I just thought there was a lot of good people in the locker room, coaches included. And, I feel like the players were the difference. They just came in with the right mindset throughout the whole year. And you felt that early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was an incredible run to see that through the regular season with the regular season championship, and then obviously taking care of business in the postseason, getting the chance to advance to March Madness, being the first team in school history to make it to the round of 64. Obviously, that team in 2022 was a first four team and was a great one. But, you guys had the chance to play in the actual round of 64 against a legit Michigan State team early on. And you guys competed early in that game, were only down 5 points at the half with, Earl being out with with that knock to the head in that game, which, went viral, went everywhere. And that was an awesome run for you guys. Obviously, I think people are going to remember some of those highlight moments from that run, the big dunks, the big plays. I had a chance to talk with, one of your counterparts at Bryant, in Ryan Daly just a couple months ago, and he talked about some of the little things that he remembered, like Connor Withers' maturation through that season and all the guys coming together. Just for yourself, if there are some little things from that run that, may, go kind of underappreciated, what would be some of those things that you'll look back on fondly?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific, but as you know, like throughout the season, like there's a bunch of highs and lows, and everyone's dealing with the same sort of things. Like everyone's going to class. Like every team in the league is dealing with injuries. Everyone's, someone's sick at home. The team that's able to deal with those situations the best, it gives them the best shot to win. I think about, guys that, we show up to practice and some days maybe we didn't have it. But I think about times when, when Ralph Pinzone goes down, gets hurt, we lose 5 straight, like at the end of the non-conference play. Like teams that end up losing later on in the season, they don't find a way to snap back after losing 5 games straight. You could easily just pack it in and be like, man, we just don't have it this year. But it's the leadership that we had, the bunch of seniors, Earl Timberlake, Kayvon Kramer, Connor Withers, Ralph Pinzone, and then guys like Ja'Kai Robinson, Barry Evans, and guys that knew how to play their role. Like we just had a bunch of guys that wanted to win and were willing to do anything to make that happen. So it was, a bunch of little things that we got past, but we ultimately got to our goal, and it's a credit to the players. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And then, when you look at March Madness and all the kind of little things that came with it. So, for example, you had the chartered flights, the police escorts, all the little nuances and the fun things that came with that, being a part of that experience, what was maybe that one kind of little nuance thing? Obviously getting the chance to play in the game, have that is obviously great. What was some of the little things on the side to where you were like, oh, this is different than, anything you guys had really been a part of previously?
Yeah. I mean, you go into the locker room and, you see all the stuff that you get just being part of the, March Madness, and you see your name on, the players have the opportunity to get their name on the top of their lockers and all that stuff. But, you walk outside the locker room and you go see the game before you playing, and you see the fans, you see, how many Michigan State fans ended up being there. You just look at the atmosphere that you're about to play in. You see family and friends there, and you just step back and look, and it's like, wow, it's a lot of people would kill to be in a position like this. Win or lose, like this experience is going to be something that you never forget. And to do it with people that you care about, that you have battled with throughout a whole season, through those ups and downs that we talked about, like that was special in itself. And who knows when that'll happen again, or if it happens to any of us again, but that's something that we'll never forget. And it was very special.
Absolutely. And then when you take the experience of, going to March Madness, having all that kind of success that you guys had a season ago, and now you're in a new place, new kind of story for yourself now. How do you take those experiences and really apply it now to this team and kind of set those expectations?
Well, you see how, a program that wins, you see how it's supposed to go. You know that it's not going to be easy, but at the end of the day, like you know what a winning team takes, what it takes to be a winning team, and hopefully that, I can, do my best to instill that into our players at St. Bonaventure and give them my experiences, though they may be little. I try my best to give them examples of how we were able to win last year. And I'm sure the guys at VCU are doing the same thing. But it's about the players trying to buy into the system and how we want to play. But, you try your best to give them as much advice that you have as possible, using the experiences that you do have.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to say with VCU, I have just a slight suspicion on who might be on the scout for that game.
Yeah.
Just, obviously it's going to be interesting with you guys being, in interconference with each other. I know you guys are playing each other on New Year's Eve this year. It's going to be a fun showdown down there in Richmond. Just, how excited are you to really compete against those guys and, having the chance to work with them, but now being on, this side of it? How excited are you for that opportunity?
I'm really excited. I miss those guys, man. Seriously, I have a lot of love for all those guys down at VCU and the guys that were at Bryant last year. You go through, like, you keep going back to the ups and downs, but it builds like a family. You start loving each other. You deal. Some days you don't like each other, some days you love each other, but I miss working with those guys every single day. So I am excited to go down there and play them, and hopefully it's a competitive game, and hopefully the Bonnies come out with a W. But I know that those guys are going to give it their all, and I'm excited to see even the players that are on that roster that I was able to build relationships with. I'm excited to see them and see how they've grown since the summer. So it should be interesting, but it's going to come up quick. So we'll be here before we know it.
I know it's going to be an exciting season for you guys. I know coming off a 20-plus win season just a year prior, you guys are poised for another big year. Just talk about what you kind of are expecting from this team this year, kind of just the play style and what you're kind of hoping to see out of this group this year.
Yeah, the team last year's roster, one thing that they struggled with was perimeter shooting, and I think that was a goal of the coaching staff this year or this offseason was to get guys that can score it from the perimeter. And with that, the mantra is like you get some more skilled guys, the toughness factor goes out the window. So our biggest thing is just making sure that we're combining both of those, bringing that skill set that we were looking for, but also keeping that, the edge and that mindset to be, a tough and gritty team. So we want to play fast. We want to play, we want to make reads. We want to let our guys play and read and react. But it's about, defending at the end of the day, rebounding the ball and making it hard for the other team to score. And, our big thing is, out rebounding the team by 10, having less than 10 turnovers and making, more free throws than the other team attempts. I think those are the three big things that we have emphasized throughout this preseason. And hopefully we can, start our season out the right way. And it'll be a little bit of a learning curve for new guys trying to gel and figure out what their roles are once these games start. But I feel like we have a good group of guys that have the same mindset and want to win. A bunch of unselfish dudes that I think will end up being really good playing together. So we're all excited over here on our end.
Totally. And then, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up in this interview. Obviously, you guys have a new face on the front office, pretty notable one with Adrian Wojnarowski, former NBA insider, now serving as your guys' general manager. Just talk about what he's been able to bring to this team and really help out with, St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, the relationships that Woj has it's crazy because, we're able to, as a small university, have a pro day where we have 23 or 24 NBA scouts watching our practice. We're able to, initiate conversations with higher level recruits from all over the world because of the connections that he has with agents and with NBA scouts and all these different people that, we couldn't build relationships with for, if we had 100 years to do it. He's just had so much power, in the game of basketball that, he's doing a great job with us and just putting us in positions to be really successful. Raising money, trying to build our NIL to something that was bigger than last year or years prior. So, he's been a great asset, obviously, to us. And, he's going to continue to build this program and help us win basketball games for years to come. And he's been a pleasure to work with. I think Woj is a great guy and a great basketball mind who works harder than anybody I know. So he's been awesome.
Absolutely. Woj is a great basketball mind, and you're a great basketball mind in your own right, Nick. One thing I got to really be able to witness during my time at Bryant was just especially in some of those Phil Martelli practices where he would really kind of hand the practice over to you, Coach Phelps, Coach Daly, and let you guys really run the practice. And I remember you were really poignant during some of your drills and were very technical, and it was really something to watch when you were leading those practices. And for yourself at your age, being able to do that, just talk about how you've been able to develop those skills in just such a short time of your coaching career.
Yeah, I give all the credit to my bosses, the people that have taught me how to coach, and I'm still learning every single day, and I'm lucky to like I said, be here at St. Bonaventure working with my father. But the bosses that I've had in the past, Aaron Kelly at Catholic, Tom Espinosa at Putnam Science, Coach Martelli at Bryant and VCU, like those guys each taught me different ways of how to be, a good man and a good basketball coach, having confidence, but being prepared and, building relationships and all that stuff is something that, I've brought to my, my coaching abilities and hopefully I continue to do that and continue to grow. But it's about the confidence part. Hopefully you got to be prepared and you got to do your homework and make sure that, when it's time to perform, like you got to be doing it to the best of your ability, and you got to put your players and your team in the best position to succeed. And I think that's an assistant coach's job. And, our job is to make sure that the head coach looks good. And if you're not doing that, then you're not doing your job. So I tried my best to do that, and I'll definitely continue to do so.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, we're almost near the end of the program now, but I just wanted to say, opening day is, inching closer for you guys. November 3rd, you guys are playing against Bradley in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I know you're excited to get back on the court and coach these guys. Just talk about that excitement you have, with opening day inching closer.
Yeah, it is. It's coming quick. It feels like it was June, like a couple weeks ago, but I think it's going to be good for our guys to, play against somebody else other than ourselves. It gets a little bit chippy in practice sometimes, which is a good thing. It's competitive, but, I think, the guys are excited, and we have another, couple scrimmages coming up that we'll be able to test ourselves and see where we're at. But the Bradley one's going to be a really good game, hopefully. And, they've had a lot of success in the recent past and had 28 wins last year. So it's going to be a tough task for us. And hopefully we're ready and we start the year off the right way. So
absolutely. It's going to be an exciting way for you guys to open the season. We wish you guys the best of luck with that. And then Nick, I just want to thank you so much for, coming on the podcast today. We'll be sure to tune into St. Bonaventure this season, and we wish you guys the best of luck.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Take care, Nick. We are now officially down to the wire, which means that we're going to wrap up the show here. But before you go, if you want to follow Down to the Wire, follow us on Instagram at down.tothewire or on our YouTube channel where you can watch the video recording of this. And if you want to watch this on streaming, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and peace out.